So how do we form the aorist subjunctive? The aorist subjunctive is formed by adding no augment because it's a non-indicative mood. You take the aorist stem, and the tense formative is different. It's a sigma tense formative combined with the long connecting vowel that signals to you that this is the aorist subjunctive, and then you add the primary active endings for the first aorist active subjunctive form. Just again, by comparison, you have the indicative here, and remember, and you see that the augments are on the indicative, but you're not going to have the augments for the subjunctive. And here is a subjunctive translation: I, may, might, loose. So instead of I may be loosing, where the present subjunctive emphasizes the continuous nature of the verb, the aorist subjunctive is undefined, so it's going to be translated as I might loose. I might loose. So to say I might loose, it's lu plus the aorist subjunctive tense formative, which is just plain sigma, and then you add the connecting vowel o, so luso. Do not confuse luso with I will loose. It looks just like the future form, luso. Context will tell you whether it's an aorist active subjunctive or whether it's a future active indicative. So it's I may, might loose. You might loose is lu plus the tense formative sigma plus the subjunctive ending ace. So that's lu ace. So luso, lusace. The third person form is lu say. Then it's lu so men for the first person plural. Second person plural is lu se te. And the third person plural is lu so si or sin. So let's say this paradigm together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Luso, lusace, lusae. Lusamen, lusete, lusosi. And that's the first aorist active subjunctive. The first aorist middle subjunctive does not take an augment. You have the aorist stem, you have the tense formative, you have the long connecting vowels, but you use the primary middle endings. And here we have the middle translation because this is for the aorist middle. The passive form for the aorist, like in the indicative, has its own unique separate form. So this can only be translated in a middle way. So to say I myself may loose, it's lu plus a sigma plus the long connecting vowel and my, so lucamai, or lu say, iota subscript, lu say tai, lu so metha, lu says the, and lu son tai. Again, the aorist middle subjunctive looks just like the present middle passive subjunctive, but you know it. But the key thing is the sigma tense formative that tells you that it's an aorist subjunctive, not the present subjunctive. Otherwise, it looks exactly the same. So let's say these forms together. 1, 2, 3. Lusomai, luse, lusetai, lusomata, lusaste, lusontai. What about the first aorist passive subjunctive? Again, for comparison, you can have the indicative forms to your left. To form the first aorist passive subjunctive, you have no augment. You take the aorist passive stem, which is just lu. You take the tense formative theta, along with the long connecting vowels. So that the bread and butter of the subjunctive is that there's always these long connecting vowels that signal the subjunctive use. And you take the primary active suffixes. So to translate, I may be loosed, the aorist passive subjunctive, you take lu, you take the tense formative theta, long connecting vowel plus the primary active suffixes, and it's lutho. You might be loosed, it's luthes. He, she, it might be loosed, luthe iota subscript. We might be loosed, luthomen. You all might be loosed, luthete, and they might be loosed, luthosi or sin. And this is the first aorist passive subjunctive forms. Let's say it together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Lutho, luthes, luthe, luthemen, luthete, luthosi. We do have second aorist forms. So remember that in the principal parts, if the verb is first aorist in its principal part, then for the indicative mood, it's going to be first aorist in its principal part for the subjunctive mood. If it's going to be second aorist in the indicative mood, when you write out the principal parts for the verb, it will also be second aorist in subjunctive. So if we take the verb lambano, for its verbal root is lob, we know that from our principal parts that lambano uses the second aorist for its indicative form. So it's elabon, elabis, elabe, etc. And so how do I form the subjunctive form? Well, I take the same second aorist stem, there's no augment, lob, and then I add the connecting vowel plus the primary active suffixes. So instead, so elabon is I received in the indicative mood, but if I might receive something, it's the form is labo, labo. What are the suffix endings for the subjunctive mood? If I were to just write this out, it's o, ace, a, iota subscript, omen, ate, oc or sin. And what I'm doing is I'm writing the second aorist stem or the verbal root all the way down the line, and that's my second aorist form. I don't need to add an augment. And so how do I say I might receive, you might receive, he, she, it might receive, etc.? Let's say the forms. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Labo, labase, labe, labomen, labete, labosi, or sin. And then how do I say the second aorist middle subjunctive? The middle subjunctive. Well, use the word ginomai as a sample. The verbal root is gen. It uses a second aorist middle form because it's an opponent. And so how do I say I might become? So if this is I became, how do I say or I may become? I'll take there's no augment, take gen, and then I add the subjunctive middle endings with the connecting vowels. This is gen, no, my. That you might or may become, gen, nay. He, she, it might become, gen, nay, tai. We might become, gen, no, mitha. You all or may might become, gen, naisthe. And then they might become, gen, known, tai. And those are the forms. Let's say together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Genomai, gene, genetai, genomatha, geneste, genontai. For the second aorist passive subjunctive, let's use grapho, which we know that uses a second, because its principal part, a graphane, uses a second aorist passive indicative form. We know that the subjunctive will also be second aorist. And so we take the stem, graph, and notice that there's no augment, that we take the aorist passive stem. There's no theta. The key feature of the second aorist passive forms is that they drop the theta, but we keep the long vowel, and they use the primary active suffixes. So this is going to be graph fo, and so graph fo can be translated I, may, or might be written. We also know that graph fo is the form that we use for the indicative mood. So you're just going to have to remember that graph fo can either be I am writing, present active indicative, or I might be written, the second aorist passive subjunctive. They have the exact same spelling. You might be written is gra face. He, she, it might be written is gra fe. We may or might be written gra fo men. You all might be written gra fe te, and they all might be written gra fo si or sit. And these are the second aorist passive subjunctives.